So guys, what's going on? I hope you guys are well. So guys, Mark Tibbs says that Billy Joe Saunders has boxing IQ like Floyd Mayweather, and he will beat Canelo because of that. I don't know where to start. Like, listen, I like Billy Joe Saunders, and Mark Tibbs is obviously a knowledgeable guy. He's a good trainer. But to make a comment like that, like, I'm sorry. Like, he's a good fighter. He's got good skills. The man's no Floyd Mayweather. Please. You know, he's no Floyd Mayweather. And like I said, Floyd Mayweather was, in my opinion, the greatest fighter of ever. Like, you know, his boxing IQ was probably the greatest boxing IQ. Like, he probably had the greatest boxing mind ever. I'm sorry, but Billy Joe Saunders hasn't shown me anything in his career thus far that I can put him and say that he's in the same league as Mayweather in terms of boxing intelligence, boxing mind, because that only gets tested when you fight the top boys in your division. Floyd Mayweather, fought something like 20-something former world champions. Billy Joe's fought about 2, you know, and they were 2 not very great. Like, Floyd Mayweather fought Hall of Famers. How many Hall of Famers has he got on his resume? Billy's got, Andy Lee and Lemieux? Like, they're hardly killers, are they? They're hardly. And people say, one guy said to me on my channel, well, they would beat you. Yeah, I'm not a boxer. Of course they'd beat me. Andy Lee and David Lemieux would beat me. I'm judging it on elite level, high level boxing. And neither of those guys. Listen, if you were to put Andy Lee and David Lemieux against all of the top 160 and 168 pounders right now, right? If you were to put Andy Lee and David Lemieux in there against Charlo, in there against Andrade, in there against Golovkin. We already saw what Golovkin did to David Lemieux. We put him in there with Callum Smith, put them in there with Canelo, put them in there with Plant, Benavidez. They get beat. Simple as that. They get hammered, by the way. What was Andy... Like, I saw Andy Lee's resume. He got beat by Chavez. This man got beat by Chavez. And listen, Chavez was a decent fight, but Chavez beat Andy Lee. Andy Lee's best win, what was his best win? A win over Korobov, a draw against Peter Quillen. That's his resume. You know, I'm sorry, but that comment about, you know, Billy Joe Saunders having an IQ. Listen, I respect Billy Joe Saunders, a good fighter, 2-weight world champion, but when you look at his resume, it's bleak. There's not a lot there. And to make a comment like that when he's not really been tested against... If you, like I said, all the names that I mentioned at 160 and 168, that would be a threat to Saunders. He hasn't fought one yet. So Andrade, Golovkin, Charlo, Callum Smith, Caleb Plant, David Benavidez. This man hasn't even fought one. Canelo, he hasn't fought one of those guys yet. Derevyanchenko, you know... He hasn't fought any of those guys. Danny Jacobs, he hasn't fought any of them. I've just named off, about 9 guys, and he hasn't faced one. So these are all guys in around 160, 168 pounds, right? He hasn't faced one of those guys yet. Simple as that. So if he had beaten 2 or 3 of those guys, I would say, you know what, he's a great fighter. But he hasn't even fought any of those top names that I've just mentioned. His wins came against guys that would lose against all of the names that I mentioned. The good wins that he had with Lee and Lemieux, and Eubank was a domestic level fight when he fought him. Lee and Lemieux would lose to all of those guys that I just mentioned and get beat emphatically, in my opinion. In my opinion, Derevyanchenko is a very good fighter, right? Very underrated. I thought he won against Golovkin. I thought he beat Golovkin, right? Charlo beat the crap out of him. Charlo beat the crap out of Derevyanchenko, and I thought Derevyanchenko beat Golovkin. So, again, to make such an outlandish comment that his boxing... I think most of even his fans that big up Saunders will agree with me that that's a ridiculous comment to say that his boxing IQ is like Floyd Mayweather. I'm sorry, I don't agree. I don't agree with that. But again, everyone's got their own opinion. Obviously, Mark Tibbs is trainer, so you know he sees a lot of things we don't. But from what we've seen so far, right, in Billy Joe Saunders' career, it doesn't come close to Floyd Mayweather. You know, this is a guy that had a majority decision against Andy Lee, had a split decision against Chris Eubank, and had a good win, a unanimous decision against David Lemieux. That's hardly anything to shout about when none of those three guys are considered top elite guys or top guys in around those divisions. Andy Lee was a guy that was a world champion, yes, but like I said, if you put Andy Lee in his prime, remember, he lost to Chavez. And Chavez against any of those guys, we all know what happens to him. So, I'm sorry, but Billy Joe's resume lacks depth, lacks quality, and lacks for me to be for him to make that comment. I just can't see where he's kind of plucked that out from, because like I said, your boxing IQ, your intelligence in the ring only gets tested when you fight the top guys. And like I said, I've named off 9 guys that are top fighters in the 168 pound division, and he hasn't fought one. Let's be honest, he hasn't fought one. So those are all guys that I think are capable of beating Billy Joe Saunders and make for very close and competitive fights. For me, he hasn't fought one yet. So, and even the guys that were a bit lesser than those guys, like Andy Lee and Chris Eubank, for example, he had very close fights with them. So the only win in his career is David Lemieux. That's his only win where you can say, wow, that was outstanding performance. And it was done against a limited guy, by the way. It was done against a guy that's got his feet stuck in sand. And people will say, oh, well, he'll beat you. Yeah, because I'm not a boxer. Right? But David Lemieux, if you're analyzing his career, he's been beat before Billy Joe Saunders, weren't he? Didn't Rubio beat him? Didn't Golovkin beat the crap out of him? He was already outboxed and beaten before. You know, when a guy's been outboxed before, and Billy Joe Saunders is a slick boxer, that style was perfect for Saunders. Lemieux's style was perfect for Saunders. You know, a guy that's flat-footed, that's slow of hand. Billy Joe Saunders was always going to pick that style apart. I even thought before, I thought if Lemieux lands something, he could knock him out, but Lemieux's not going to land anything on Saunders because Saunders is too elusive. And Canelo, but again, Canelo's a different cat. Andrade's a different cat. These are very, very good boxers in their own right. David Benavidez is a very, very good boxer in his own right. And he's very, very big and strong, and he'll just walk through Billy Joe Saunders' punches. And can Billy Joe Saunders keep someone like Benavidez off? I don't know. And Caleb Plant is a very good boxer. Very, very good. He's not fought nobody, but from what I've seen so far, he's a very skillful boxer. A lot of people think he's the only guy that's going to give Canelo trouble. I don't think anybody gives Canelo trouble, but at the end of the day, I think all of these guys need to fight one another. And at the minute, I don't think anyone's fought one another. None of these guys have fought one another. None of them. Canelo's the only one that's got his hands dirty. He's fought Golovkin and Callum Smith. He's the only one. Yet Billy Joe Saunders, Andre Chart, none of these guys have even fought each other. When are we going to get to see these guys fight one another? Now, I do think Billy Joe Saunders is probably going to get his chance against Canelo, because I think Canelo's probably going to look at Saunders as a fight which he's be very confident. And Teddy Atlas said that he said that when you look at Caleb Plant, Saunders, they're all right. They're decent fighters, but he basically was saying they're easy wins for Canelo. That's what he was saying. Teddy Atlas. He says that they're good fighters and they could cause him problem in spots, but they're quite comfortable wins for Canelo. He goes, the only guy that he thinks that is going to give Canelo trouble at 168 is David Benavidez. And I kind of agree. I watched David Benavidez against Julian Love. I know Julian Love's not a top-notch guy, but David Benavidez battered him. And I'm talking, he just walked through him. He's big, he's strong, he can put punches, quite fast hands as well. He's got quite fast hands and he's strong. That's not going to be an easy fight for Canelo, because this is a guy really that probably should be competing at 175 in Benavidez. Benavidez is going to be a very, very dangerous fight for Canelo. And like I said, I do think that size and that tenacity that Benavidez has, that could be a problem for Canelo. That's not going to be easy. No way. Benavidez can really, really fight. And like I said, I think someone like Benavidez for Saunders, that would be a nightmare matchup for Saunders, just because I think Benavidez is a big dude and Billy Joe Saunders I don't think he'll be big enough. I just think Benavidez will walk straight through him. That would be a hard fight, you know. And actually, I think Benavidez, I know people were saying Callum Smith was the Ring Magazine #1. And yeah, he was obviously the Ring Magazine #1. And he was probably the ranked #1 guy. I actually think Benavidez was probably the best 168 pounder. And I looked at his fight yesterday and went through some of his highlights. This guy's impressive. Even Lennox Lewis was very, very impressed with Benavidez, and Lennox Lewis said that this kid's got a very bright future. He's a star, and I think Benavidez could be a problem for Canelo. I think Benavidez could be one of those guys where he could get to Canelo, but again, Benavidez don't live the life, and that could be an issue. But again, that's a tough fight for Canelo. If Benavidez puts his gets his foot down on the ground and starts working hard and pulls his finger out, I do think David Benavidez is going to be Canelo's toughest fight at 168. I do. I think I saw him fight, and he's big, he's strong, he's got fast hands, he can punch. I would love to see Saunders against Benavidez. If he can't get the Canelo fight and Canelo fights Plant or something, why not Benavidez against Saunders? Let's see how good Saunders is, because that would be a tough fight for Billy Joe Saunders. I'm telling you, Benavidez can really fight. And I'm starting to think that I agree with Teddy Atlas. Benavidez might be the only guy that can beat Canelo at 168. Before I saw Benavidez and saw his highlights, and again, Benavidez hasn't fought anyone really. If you look at his resume, I think he fought Darrell, but his resume is not the greatest. I do think Benavidez is a big threat just because of the physical attributes he has over Canelo and the fast hands that he has, and I think he's a tough guy. And that's a hard fight for Canelo. I would love to see that. Billy Joe Saunders, good fighter. Boxing IQ like Mayweather, not a chance. Or he hasn't proven it yet. You got to prove that. You can't just say things. You've got to go out there and prove it against elite competition. And unfortunately, Billy Joe Saunders hasn't proved it against elite competition yet. He hasn't proved it against the best at 160 or 168 for his trainer to say that. But then again, it's his trainer. His trainer's gonna say that, and his trainer obviously sees things that we don't. But I think we need to see more from Saunders, and hopefully he gets that Canelo fight or he gets an Andrade fight where we get to see how good he is, because I don't know how good Saunders is. He might be bang average. He might get blown away by Andrade or Canelo, or he may rise to the occasion. We just don't know. We have to see it for us to kind of see how good he is. But leave your thoughts, guys. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. And guys, remember to please like, share, subscribe to my channel. I'll see you guys all in the next video. Peace.